Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 27. Another 7 curious, interesting things I saw last week. So as ever, let's crack on. The first one is from the University of Maryland in America, obviously, and they have shown this really funky way of recovering the 3D scene in front of somebody by just looking at the reflection in the person's eyes. Now it needs to be a moving reflection, so it needs to have a little bit of footage. However, you're seeing on the left-hand side what they're doing is they're recovering the scene, so it looks at the eye and basically re-stretches the scene, removes the iris essentially, because that can obviously have a difference, or it's unique to each person, and they can construct these kind of interesting scenes. So you're looking at a bit of a Pokemon and a dog, and then also a kitchen in front of somebody, so they can kind of reconstruct that, which is kind of interesting. And then if you look on the right hand side, this is what they're reconstructing from Lady Gaga, for instance, and Miley Cyrus's videos, obviously pop videos, so they can actually retrospectively look at what the person might have been looking at. It's a bit crude, but you can see probably from the bottom one that it looks a little bit like the torso of somebody, so that might have been the photographer or whatever in front of them. So that's kind of interesting. As long as you've got a HD input, then you might be recovering the scenes that somebody was looking at when they were watching or recording a video. So that's kind of interesting. The first ever Olympic esports week has just happened. This was in Singapore. This was curious. I'm not quite sure I kind of get it, to be honest. There were some show events, so Rocket League, etc. Then they sort of split the actual event into what I would have thought sort of gaming, and then these kind of physical sports. So some of the physical sports were things like taekwondo or dancing, or if you are a Zwift bike, for instance. So actual athletes doing actual physical stuff, but in the digital world. So taekwondo was kind of interesting, using headsets and little sensors, lots and lots of calibration going on, and it was just a little bit tedious to watch, to be honest. If you follow the forums and if you're looking at sort of taekwondo martial arts, and pretty much everybody absolutely hated it. It was most of the comments were like, how could you take something that was so respectful and turn it into this, how to degrade it even further. But there you go. But we've got some finalists now, lots of sports involved, so have a look at it. I'm not quite sure about it, but we'll see again, I guess in another 4 years time. A lot will happen between now and then. I don't know how you would say this one. Apate, I don't know. But this was a really good use. If you're worried about AI being used for lots and lots of worse and worse things for society, then this is a good thing. You can talk about this at your dinner parties. So this is from researchers in Australia. They formed a small company. I'm not sure the actual product is available yet, but give them a ring and they'll probably let you use it. So what it does is it has been trained on scam calls and how to keep scam callers busy. So the more you can keep them busy, the less they're going to actually call somebody else and scam them. Now, I do this personally. I've got a little bit of a thing that I do. I enjoy telling stories, and therefore when a scammer then phones me up, I actually engage with them and I tell them all sorts of stories. The record I've got is about 13.5 minutes engaging them. So this can on average keep them engaged for 5 minutes, which I think is actually pretty good. I think they've done about 20,000 calls and they've averaged 5 minutes per call. So if you add all that up, that is the amount of scammers' time that hasn't been wasted or used for actual scamming. So I really, really like that. So it learns as the scamming techniques evolve and what they say. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. That's a really good thing. More of that, please. So this is a really good example. I don't know whether you saw the Meta example where Zuckerberg had these really weird legs in VR, and it turns out they weren't really real. It was the whole metaverse thing that everybody was going on about a couple of months ago. He says with a wink and a twinkle in his eye. So what this is actually using is just the headset sensors and just the controllers in your hands. And what it's then doing is it's using only that to predict where the limbs might be. So it's obviously using your hands and your arms and quite literally the sensors. So it can't see everything in the room, but it does know, in this case, what they're doing is they're mimicking where the chair is, where the table is, where the box is, etc. So that's known, but the actual physical interaction with the space is all being done just because of the headset and the controller. So I think that's really interesting, especially for the third party. So me looking at another character within the VR space, all of a sudden that becomes far more interesting. So you've seen the examples before with just sort of disembodied body floating around, this might actually start to become quite interesting. So well done there. I like that also. This is a really interesting report. This is from the Association of National Advertisers. Now, what they've done is they've taken some of their members and taken an ad spend. And what they've then done is they've said how many of their programmatic ads, so the ads you see around the internet, how many of those have appeared on these special types of sites which are made for advertising sites. So these are low quality. They've probably got sort of clickbaity, spammy stuff, and also a lot of the text on there is generated by AIs now, because it knows what to generate so that it gets noticed by people and or search engines. So it turns out that of that, 21% of the programmable advertising ended up on these sites with questionable or even no audience, and also that accounted for 15% of the ad spend are going on to these made for advertising sites. So that's kind of interesting. So lots of other things that the Association of National Advertisers report has in them. Some of them are on the right hand side. So link is below. It's well worth a read. This is a really interesting one. Love this one. This is a giant dot matrix printer. This is actually by YouTuber Ryder, and actually Ryder Calm Down is the full name. But just really interesting. It uses Raspberry Pi and some solenoids and some water valves and that sort of thing. So as you drive along the road, it squirts water onto the road and therefore can write messages. Now, obviously of limited use unless you have an airplane and or a drone, but I really like the idea of this. It's just, you know, why not? This is also how skywriting planes actually do it as well. So if you've ever seen those kind of modern skywriting planes, they can actually use dot matrix, so they have little puffs of sort of diesel smoke in the air. So I really like that. That's also pretty good. And I also love this. This is the last one. And finally, this is, so Tesla in the UK, Tesla are doing all sorts of things to reduce costs around the world. And one of those things is in any market that actually has a right-hand drive car, like the UK, for instance, they're stopping making those right-hand drive cars in certain models. So they've contacted anybody who's on the shopping list and said, look, you can either cancel it or you can have a test drive, see if you still want one. However, here you go, and there's a bit of a discount, I think, as well. So anybody who's now opted for a left-hand drive Tesla obviously can't do things like put their key fob on the work gate or whatever they might need to do. So Tesla have now, and this is actually real, they now have delivered your Tesla with the Reacher, which is a stick so that you can actually press and reach the stuff on the other side of the car that you couldn't do because there isn't a seat there anymore. Well, there is, but you're not allowed to sit in it when you're driving. Kinda. So anyway, so I really like the, that is a bit daft obviously, but I really like the innovative thinking, and I quite like the brainstorm that must have gone on when somebody goes, hang on, here's an idea, and everybody's gone, that's brilliant, let's make it. So there you go. The Reacher stick probably gets my nod for the best thing I've seen this week. Hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully it was useful. If it was, give it a like, share it with somebody, and I will see you next week.